Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our special council meeting of February 18th, 2025. I call the meeting to order at 9:33, and I would like to ask the clerk for the roll call, please.
Mayor Sidney.
Present.
Revimo.
Present.
Councillor Legree.
Present.
Councillor McWhorter.
Present.
Councillor McDonald.
Present.
Councillor Slawalski.
Present.
Councillor Andrew Dick. Mayor Sidney, we have quorum.
Thank you. As we gather, we would like to acknowledge on behalf of Council and our community that we are meeting on the traditional territory of the Algonquin people. We would like to thank the Algonquin people and express our respect and support for their rich history, and we are extremely grateful for their many and continued displays of friendship. We also thank all of the generations of people who have taken care of this land for thousands of years. Any declaration of interest? Hearing and seeing none. Moving on to C.1. Aqua proposed 2025 maintenance, capital water and wastewater budget requests. There is a motion. I just want to highlight that unfortunately representatives from Aqua are not able to attend today, but we do have staff who can possibly clarify some questions that we may have. And the motion is the Renfrew Town Council receive Ontario Clean Water Agency's proposed 2025 maintenance and capital budget requests as information. Mover, please. Councillor Legree, second by Councillor McWhorter. And I will now turn it over to Manager Springer for an overview. Thank you.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. So there's two parts to the Aqua budget. There's their operations part, and then there's the capital part. And their definition of capital is different than our definition of capital. So there are some small projects that get put into capital, but really what they mean by capital is there's some things that are planned, and then there are some things then that are only used as needed, as is the entire contract with Aqua, because it is cost plus, so if they don't use the money, we get a credit back. So you'll see in the major maintenance forecast that there is a 6-year forecast. Really the next 2 years are where they focus most of their attention, and the next 4 years after that they kind of plop in some numbers just to kind of keep it in mind that it's coming up, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be that year, just because we will reassess as we go forward. So really pay attention to just the next kind of year, 2 years on that forecast. Each of the forecasts are divided into multiple parts. So the there's maintenance projects are usually at the top, and those are like sort of the small things that they just want us to be aware that might happen, but often a lot of this budget does not get used because, again, they only spend the money if they need to, but they just, if it does happen to come that something breaks, they don't want us to be caught off guard or for us to not have a budget for those items and then have to go over budget. The next section is the minor capital projects, and again, those are things that are under $25,000. And then we go into the major capital projects, which are greater than $25,000. And then for the plants, we also have the building condition assessments, which were from Morrison Hirschfield, did a building condition assessment in 2020, so there's some items in there, but for this year there's nothing in that category. So that is how it is set up for the major maintenance forecast. Myself, Aqua, the Treasurer, Director Withers, and Director Bishop have already gone through this with Aqua and removed what we could or postponed projects in order to sort of whittle it down as much as we could. But if there's any specific questions about any specific line item, I can do my best to answer them. Or we can, record that question and get a response from Aqua for you. That's all.
Thanks. Any questions from Council? Councillor McDonald.
Thank you, Mayor, to you. It's the first page, Amanda, and it's at the very bottom, main breaks and repairs. We have $125,000 a year for it. What's our normal yearly, the data on that one?
Through you, Mayor. Because this is the first year that Aqua has done water distribution and had to deal with main breaks, we don't really have a lot of data on that, and I don't have an exact number for you for this year handy, but I can get that for you. What I can tell you is we had about 7 this year, and last year, or the year previous, 2023, we had, I think, 1 or 2. They're typically around $15,000 to $20,000 per incident. It depends, obviously, on how severe it is, where it is, when it is, all that factors in, but around $15,000 to $25,000, or $15,000 to $20,000 per occurrence.
Councilor McDonald, follow-up?
Thank you again, Mayor, through you. Right underneath that line item, we have water main replacement on Mattaway Drive 2025, but there's nothing in there. Should there be, or should that be taken out, the water main replacement on Mattaway Drive?
Treasurer?
Yes, through you, Mayor. So that is a project that's going to be completed by the town, and it's on the town water capital sheet. And if anything is required from Aqua, they'll be contracted to do anything at that time, but I believe everything is going to be done through the town, and there's a cost of that of $669,000, almost $670,000 for Mattaway. And that is a priority project. We've had about 5 breaks on it, and when you're looking at about $20,000 a break, it adds up very quickly. So we're highly recommending that project move ahead in 2025.
Councilor Zabolski?
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. I just want to maybe get my head around this and then suggest that maybe we potentially go through this quickly line by line. Councilor McDonald, I'm having a hard time just jumping around, so if we could. But just for clarification, I want to understand that the water budget and the wastewater budget are as per planned. Everything on the longer sheet is extra and above. And if I could just make a little bit of a clarifying question maybe in my head. So we've handed our business over to Aqua from the town of Renfrew for maintenance of distribution. And we're a year in now, and they've had a year's time to assess our system and have handed us $2.6 million worth of needs. Is that basically the way I'm seeing this? Or can someone explain to me why I'm looking at such a big cost here before we get into the line by line?
Treasurer?
Through you, Mayor. So basically, the capital, they're looking at including all of our capital. I didn't separate it at all between, and this is just for water, it's 1.8 million, almost 1.9 million. And then I did include the maintenance part within the budget, 84,150. I just need to find it. My understanding was that I had included it, but I think it's all the maintenance projects. 259. Yeah, so it's under the actual capital. If you look at your water budget, this sheet, it is on the second page in the capital, 259,150. Which is the bottom of that first page, water system major maintenance, at the bottom of that first long sheet, the 8.5 by 14, it's all included in there. So it's 1.85 for water, and then wastewater is an additional, get to the end. $1.87 for wastewater for all our capital requests as well as their capital and maintenance requests. And Amanda has further information because I may not be.
Manager Springer?
thank you, through you, Mayor. So Aqua has been running our plants for over a decade. It's just the collection and distribution part that's new, and on capital for those two items, for distribution, it's just a little over $250,000, so 260,000, and for wastewater collection for the capital, it's 171,000.
Do you have a follow-up, Councillor Spolsky?
I'll hit pause right now while this soaks in. Thank you, Mayor. Yeah.
Councillor McWhorter?
Through you, Chair. For the treasurer, have any of these maintenance costs, like you're showing maintenance costs here that may or may not happen, and that's being made up in this budget, and if I understand it, we're going to raise taxes to cover something that we may or may not have to do. I'm just wondering, and then when it comes to the water main out for Mattaway, is any of that possible to be covered by our reserves, and just what are our reserves right now at? If you could tell me that.
Treasurer?
Yeah, so this is separate. This is water and sewer rates rather than taxes, just to clarify. And I know Councillor McWhorter understands that, but just for wording for any public member that's watching that. And the rates, so I presented the rates last week, and the rates are based off of the rate study. So anything above and beyond those rates that are calculated into the actual water and wastewater budgets, when you look at the bottom end, we would have to finance or take out of reserves. So in reserves, what was budgeted, of course, we haven't finished the year end, so what we think is going to end up at the end of the year for sewer is 1.4 million in reserves, and in water 2.8. So those are what was budgeted in 2024, having knowing that we haven't taken anything extra or left anything in that wasn't completed last year. So once we have the year-end numbers, we'll know better, but that's what was budgeted for the end of the year 2024, 2.8 and 1.4.
Councillor McWhorter?
Thank you, Treasurer, through you, Chair. So I understand water rates and I understand taxes. Truth be told, water rates used to be part of taxes, so I'm still old school. When you tell me I'm paying 5% water and I'm paying 5% taxes, that's a 10% tax increase, to me anyways, being old school. What I'm wondering is there any way we can use reserves, like we have 2.8 million, is there any way we can use reserves to fund the Mattaway water-only part?
Treasurer?
Yeah, so before I get into the funding sources, I'm waiting to see what council decides on which projects to go ahead, and that's why I haven't identified. But absolutely, we would be using reserves or OSIF funding or gas tax, because OSIF and gas tax can be used towards water and wastewater. I will take a full look at it this week before the public budget meeting next week if council decides. The other thing I might suggest, and we could reduce some of these maintenance costs and say we'll pass $50,000 worth of the first section. If it's required, any above and beyond is what, if it's required, then we could come back to council at that point in time, is what my suggestion would be. I don't know that they're going to complete all of these items, and it's like, okay, if we have to do it, we're going to do it. We want permission to do it. So what I'm recommending is, okay, maybe then we don't fund those, and we say, okay, we're going to pass under collection maintenance projects. They're anticipating 91,000, almost 92,000. We approve 50,000 of that and not identify a specific project, but then if they go over and above the 50,000, then we'll bring a report to council later on, and we'll find that money in reserves, or see if the operating is in a surplus situation or not, is my recommendation for those, anything that's minor. The capital projects that they feel that they are going to go ahead with is kind of a different story. We could fund those, but I think the ones that are iffy, maybe we can, Amanda and I can sit with them again and say, okay, what projects do you think may not go ahead, knowing that we're, a month and a half into things, and take those off the list, knowing that they can come back to council at some point and say, okay, yes, we do have, one of those projects is a necessary, and we can move ahead with that. That would be my suggestion.
I like that suggestion.
Councillor Sobolski?
Thank you, through you, Mayor, and thank you, Treasurer Jackson. What I was about to say was going to encompass where you just went there. But to follow that up and go in a little bit more detail, last meeting I asked about when some of our debentures were coming off of our water and wastewater loans, and in 2027 we'll have an additional $215,000 per year freeing us up. And then to follow up what you just said about maybe setting a budget for them to have reactive type repairs available to them, and postponing as much capital works until at least that 2027 budget comes available to us, then we can sit down and make a plan and do another debenture that fits into that $215K that's available to us to get these capital projects and things up to date, but giving them a potential budget in lieu of for, I hate to say reactive type repair, but it would get us potentially through to a certain date. I'm open to an idea like that or discussion.
Treasurer?
I like that idea. However, it also falls on our ability to borrow, so that $215,000 will clear, but it clears for the town of Renfrew, not just for water or wastewater. And then we have to look at the town as a whole, so which project is the most beneficial to move forward. We're going to get $215,000 more in, I forget if it's wastewater or water, but that can go simply into reserves as well, and then it can be taken out of reserves for specific projects rather than borrowing. I don't think there's any big, huge projects that Aqua's looking at this point. There's smaller projects that we could, like, in other words, under $500,000 that we could look at. When you look at their actual projects for water, I don't see anything large. The biggest number I see on water in 2026 is $100,000. When you add it all up, yes, it's a big number, but a lot of them are under $100,000, so could be taken out of reserves rather than looking at the borrowing aspect, because the borrowing affects the whole municipality rather than when we free up that number, our ability to borrow. So I would suggest that, but I'll leave that to you.
Actually, I have a question for Manager Springer. You said that staff went through and took what you thought you could take out, and then this is what we have. Is there anything that you know of that is an absolute need to do versus we don't really have to do it right now, kind of a thing? Because I think that's where my brain's at. I see the list, but what is like? I'm full in favor of the Mattaway thing because I think that's a gong show, but if there's anything that we think we can not do or anything like that?
Yeah, through you, Mayor, to you. Like I said, we have, through the Aqua sheets, already gone through and kind of pushed what we could. The really big stuff is the walkway membrane at the wastewater treatment plant. It's $125,000 budgeted for that. Not only is it a safety issue, but it's actually, the water is infiltrating into the concrete and could be become a structural issue, so that needs to be done. It was planned for last year, but the Aqua tendered that, and there was only one bid that came in that was acceptable through their procurement policy, and that was way over budget, so we're retendering that in hopes that we'll get more competitive bids at this time of year. And on the water side, the filter rehabilitation in there, which I think is $145,000, and that's a 3-year project, 140 this year, 150 next year, and 150 the following year. That's been a long-standing project that both for the under drain system, like the concrete work and the mechanical part of that needs to be redone, and we've kind of known about that for a while. And then the filter media also needs to be replaced. So that's also a critical project on the water side. In terms of like not as critical projects, you know, the meter replacements, I think there's a bit of wiggle room on that one. However, I don't deal with the meters, so I don't really know, but it does seem a bit of more of an optional one. And then of course the demolition of the old wastewater treatment plant, I mean, it can wait, but it's also been waiting for a decade, so, but it could wait.
Thank you. Any other questions from Council? Councilor McDonald?
Thank you, Mayor. Through you. In keeping with what Councilor McWhirter stated earlier with the, could some of the articles be financed through the reserves? I wonder, would that also fit for the 8th Street Dominion? And in that area, it's under town water capital, I guess to the finance person, or finance individual. If we can put some stuff into out of the reserves, and my whole thought process is we still have to absorb Mattaway this year, and if we can utilize some of the reserves to lower some of the impact with regard to the water. So that's my other question.
Treasurer?
Thank you, through you. So any of the 2024 carryover projects have already been financed through the 2024 budget process. So I will take a look at those moving forward. These did not move ahead, or they're starting to move ahead, the design only. The water and wastewater storage building. So there is some work that was done initially, but there's still a lot of work to be done, and the costs are split half and half. So yes, so those are basically already included in the year-end budgeted amount for 2024 if they were funded from reserve. So I will, once we get the finalized capital and where it was supposed to be funded from, then I'll know better what's left over. But those, we can say they're carrying over from 2024 as approved, and they're already have funding available to them, if that makes sense. Does that make sense? Okay.
Any other questions from council? Oh, CAO, sorry.
Through you, Mayor, to all of council, one thing based off of the information that I've heard is that the main breaks and repairs, they're budgeting a flat 125 based off of, you know, this last year we had 7 breaks. However, a large portion of them were on the Mattaway Drive. So if you're taking the effort to replace the Mattaway, you might be able to this year only have a reduce, because that's where a large amount of the ones from 24 were on. And if we're going to take the effort to replace that, then you're not going to get the breaks on that road once it's completed. So that's something to look at as well as an option.
Councilor McDonald?
And I'm just wondering, it was brought up with regard to the proposed projects, the old wastewater treatment plant demolition. I'm just talking to the clerk as of today, and I'm going to put a motion forth at our next council meeting that we have a current update. This is back in 2019. So I'm wondering, what would you like to do? I guess I'm talking to you, Mayor, or the CAO. Can we remove that for now till we get an actual cost price once staff looks into this?
CAO?
So through the Mayor to council, so if council wished to not proceed with the demolition of this year, but take this year to update the costing and expectations for a 2026 plan, then yes, this 482,000, sorry, it was too far away even with my glasses, the 482,000 could be postponed out of the 2025, and we could be working on getting costs for the 2026 budget. If that is the will of council, that is something that is open to you.
Councillor McCorder?
I agree with Councillor McDonald. I think I'd like to have an exact figure. I don't want to go in blind and find out it's $1 million when we start off at 4, so I think maybe hold off and look at it for 2026, so, and budget it accordingly, like knowing that there may be an increase. That'd be great. Thank you.
Councillor Sabalski?
Thank you to you, Mayor. I'm in left field to this conversation. Sorry, guys. Can I bring something else up or a question in general? Page 2, it's under the wastewater treatment category is the treatment maintenance projects. That whole block there at the bottom, it's at 96,000. Is this an extra over and above our contract, this entire block, or is this just showing us what's in our contract? Because these items, to me, I wouldn't expect this to be proposed as extras. I thought this should be standard contract issued items, if I could just get a which way that those ones stand.
Manager Springer?
Through you, Mayor. These are separate from the operations and maintenance part. The operations and maintenance contract is more for like staff, very, very set known things that they'll need, like chemicals and that type of stuff.
Councillor Zabalski? You good?
Thank you, Mayor Sidney. I don't like this column. This should be included in a contract. If I'll entertain you for a bit, miscellaneous small items, that's something that's included in a contract. The SCUDA support devices, I understand what those are. If anyone isn't familiar, it's basically a refrigeration protection system, or if there's a failure in a room or a mechanical room, it's a face mask that you can put on to guarantee that your health is taken care of if you have to enter the room. But like generator third-party repairs, floor maintenance, HVAC service, these are all items that I would have expected to see in a general contract that's laid out for us. I know it's only 96,000. I know that we're not going to do them all, but I have a hard time swallowing this list as an extra. I would have anticipated over the years this was included. I'm not asking for the world to change. I'm just voicing my frustration that I'm seeing this, and like up to $8,000 for AHU repairs per year, and then increasing from there. I understand it's a budgeted item that could happen, ABC, but still, it's I dislike seeing that as an extra in general.
The CAO?
Through the mayor to council, I understand your concern on this. I will let you know, seeing aqua contracts in multiple locations, this is a common way that the contract is written. I know it may not be what was the expectation, but I do want to make aware that that is kind of how they run their processes, because they don't include it in the regular contract when they don't know for sure these items will be needed. So the contract on an annual basis typically only includes the things that they know definitely, no matter what, have to happen. I can understand maybe where some of the frustration might be coming from. But this is kind of how their standard contract does look. It could be something you go to negotiate again in, I think it's 9 more years, something about integrating a little more of that into the contract. But I did want to make sure that you were aware that this is kind of how the Aqua One's contracts look, and it's because these are items they just can't guarantee exactly what year they need to
Councillor McCorder?
Chair, thank you. So with that said, if these are maintenance items that $96,000 that they may or may not use, I like Treasurer Jackson's analysis that maybe we should only be budgeting for half of the money, and if they do need the extra money, they come to council and we fund it through reserves or some other way. But I really have trouble. I agree with Councillor Sabalski. Every time I see maintenance, I thought that's what they were doing. So it kind of, the wording isn't very good optics for me. But I like the idea of the treasurer that maybe we don't need to budget and tax people before we need to do that. You're kind of getting things ahead, I think. But to say you might need it, you put it in your budget, and then you don't need it. You know, at this time, we can't really afford to be taxing people any more than we have to at this point. I think down the road, that might be something we can look at for sure and include it in the contract. But I agree. I think maybe we should just look at funding half. As Treasurer Jackson said, I like that idea better.
Reeve, you know, not to put you on the spot, but I just sometimes miss you, so I'm not sure if you have anything you want to say or anything. You don't have to. I just want to make sure that I didn't miss you.
No, it's all right. Thank you, Your Worship. I did have just one comment that I had written down. The demolition of the plant, I agree with the idea of not proceeding this year and getting a fixed cost or a good estimate. I'm wondering if we should, at a minimum, maybe put half of the projected funds away in a reserve for this year, so that it's not such a bump next year. Thank you.
Thank you. Treasurer Jackson?
Through you, Mayor. So these are projects that are not funded out of anywhere. So it's not like we're funding them and then we can put money into reserves because we're not going ahead with them. With the rate schedule as it is now, looking at the budget, we're still looking for wastewater. We're still looking for $1.3 million. So if we took that off, we'd be looking at 900,000 or so. So it's, I understand your theory, and I think we would go out for an RFQ rather than just to get a quote, rather than, and for a quote for demolition in 2026, rather than an actual price. And that would be a quote that we can't guarantee anybody's going to take the time to do a quote, rather than actually do the project, an RFT, a request for tender. So we'll try to get an updated amount, but there's no guarantee that that updated amount is going to be anywhere near close to what we would tender for in 2026 at that time. So I would caution everybody with regards to that, especially knowing that we have our neighbors on the border that could cause havoc with our prices. So this was a 2019 price, and we know the price will definitely change. That was before COVID. That was before a lot of things, and now we're dealing with our neighbors. So that could cause an extra issue on top of everything else.
Any other questions or comments from council? So I guess it goes out to council then, if we want to take off the demolition. Do you want to go move ahead with that? Like now I guess it's the time to sort of, what are we looking at here? Councilor McDonald?
I'm for taking it off at this point in time, and like I said, there'll be a motion that we can deal with at the next council meeting on Tuesday.
Councilor McGuire?
Through you, Chair. I agree. I think we should take this off until we get a firm pricing. I don't like going into the unknown and not knowing what the pricing is going to be. I think we could put it off for another year. And I'd really like us to look at, I like Treasurer Jackson's idea about looking at some of these miscellaneous charges and like going like half or something, and then we can deal with whatever comes up as the year goes on. I'm sure we can come to some agreement as to where we get the money for that. But I like the idea of that. And I agree with Your Worship. Mattaway does seem to be something we should maybe have a hard look at doing, because it's just costing us money, and in the long run, is it cheaper to replace, like fix it, or just keep patching it, Thank you.
Councilor Legree?
Through you, Mayor Sidney. So I agree with Councillor McWhirter. Mattaway needs to be fixed. I came out of there last night, and it's kind of like a Dukes of Hazzard jump now even. But I like the idea of putting the building off and then just setting mounts for each. So just to clarify, do we need a motion now to take or what do we need out of this, just so I'm clear?
Clerk?
So I've been kind of following, sorry, through you, Mayor. I've been kind of following along. I think I've captured some of the changes that everybody's discussed. I might need a little bit of help with the actual numbers, but I'll kind of read off if I've captured everything, and then we can kind of adjust the numbers as we go from there. So that Renfrew Town Council bring forward the following changes to the 2025 water and wastewater, I guess I should say aqua budget. Okay, so changes to the 2025 water and wastewater draft budget. That town council approve up to, I had 50,000 for collection and maintenance projects, and that any additional expenditures required are brought forward to council for approval and funding allocation. I'm not sure if that was the right total. We talked about a half, but and then, so 2, that the budget for water main breaks be reduced to, again, we can insert the number. CAO Raybone had indicated that 120 also included the Mattaway, so if we were going to reduce that amount. And then 3, that the demolition of the wastewater plant be removed from the budget to allow staff time to determine actual costs in advance of the 2026 budget deliberation.
Treasurer?
Through you, Mayor. Yes, that's about right. So I think it's the maintenance for both water and wastewater that we would reduce to 50,000, and we're not specifying any particular project, so we'll let Aqua know that, and then we'll let them know if they've gone over the 50 that they need to come to council, and we can reduce the main breaks and repairs, no guaranteeing that there is going to be less breaks because we're doing the project of Mattaway, because we don't know when that project's going to start. It could not start until August, and by then we've eaten up the 125,000, so that's a concern. But if council wants us to reduce that, it would just mean that we've gone over the budget due to the number of breaks, but I can do that. And I think Ms. Springer has further comments.
Manager Springer?
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, so if we do reduce the main breaks and repairs, just know that like when a main does break, it is an emergency, and I can't call a council meeting in 5 minutes to get that approved. So we would just have to go over budget, but then of course we would find that funding either through reserves or through other parts of the budget that didn't get used. In terms of the maintenance projects, just so that we're all on the same page, it's we want to reduce it to $50,000 for wastewater collection, wastewater treatment, water treatment, and water distribution. So 4 different categories that are each going to have 50,000. Yes, yes, good, okay. Thank you.
That's my understanding. Councilor McDonald?
Thank you, Mayor, through you. And I think it's important, I just had it confirmed with Amanda, that the Mattaway system feeds the MyFM proper, and that's our emergency operations center, so I think it's a priority that we have that work done too. Thanks.
All right, any other questions or comments from council? Treasurer?
Through you, Mayor, and we're also waiting until 2026 for the meter replacement. Did council want me to reach out to find out if any of these tariffs could affect the meter replacement costs moving forward? We may be better off trying to do some of the project in 2025 and some in 2026. Like I think Councillor Cybulski said, over a 5-year term. And if there is any issue with tariffs, I can bring that back to council in the event that there are tariffs assigned, but we don't know from day to day, so.
Councilor McWhorter?
That sounds like a great idea, but I would suggest you look at Buy Canadian first.
Any other questions from council? Councilor McDonald?
Thank you, through you, Mayor. And Charlene, I think you said they guaranteed the price, or the price was quoted for a 2-year. And maybe if we can look into, and I love that idea about spreading out over 4 years that Councillor Sobalski had, maybe the like a price idea of what we're looking for, whether it's 4 or 5 years? Thanks.
Any other questions or comments from council? Clerk?
Sorry, through you, Mayor. Through the discussion, just to finalize the wording of the motion, looking for council's direction on the reduction they'd like to see for the water main breaks. I think it's currently set in the budget at 120,000. Oh, sorry.
Any thoughts from council on, if we are doing Mattaway, but then the treasurer has a point too of the, you know, if it doesn't get done until August. So anyway, Councillor Legray?
Through you, Mayor Sidney, to Manager Springer, and I might have missed this, so I apologize. Out of the 7 we had in 2024, how many of them were Mattaway? Do we know of?
Through you, Mayor. I believe there was 2, and they were pretty much back-to-back, like one day and then the next. And then the one in 2023, there was one there. Speaking with the staff, who've worked, you know, for a decade with the town, there's been one pretty much every year for the last 10 years.
Councillor Legray?
Through you, Mayor. Then if there was 5 other ones, then we can't really reduce it by, I wouldn't reduce it by hardly any, because time we get, we could have another one in Mattaway yet before we even fix it, right? Well, I guess we'd fix it at that time, but I wouldn't reduce it by much, me personally. Thanks, if any.
Councillor Sobalski?
Yeah, thank you, through you, Mayor. I second to what Councillor Legray is saying. I was about to say, I would say we budget for 5 breaks a year. If we're over, we're over, we're under, but it's a nice number.
So would you recommend like 5 breaks at 20 grand?
5 breaks at 20 grand,
So 100,000?
100,000.
So reduce it by 25,000. Council okay with that? Revimo, do you have any questions or comments? No. Okay. Treasurer?
And I guess just to further comment with regards to Ms. Springer's comments, if there is a break, it's an emergency and it has to happen, so we won't be coming back to council if we're going over the $100,000. We are proceeding, and it will work out at the end of the year with regards to surplus or deficit for the total budget on water. Okay?
Council's good with that. They understand that they're going to go ahead and do it, whether it's going to put us over budget or not. Yeah. Perfect. Any other questions, comments? Everybody good? Yes, if the clerk could read that motion.
Okay, that Renfrew Town Council bring forward the following changes to the 2025 water and wastewater draft budget. 1, that Town Council approve up to $50,000 for both water and wastewater distribution and collection projects, and that any additional expenditures required are brought forward to Council for approval and funding allocation. 2, that the budget for water main breaks be reduced to $100,000. 3, that the demolition of the wastewater plant be removed from the budget to allow for staff time to determine actual costs in advance of the 2026 budget deliberation. And 4, that staff bring forward budgeted costs for water meter replacement over a 4-year term.
Manager Springer?
Through you, Mayor, if we want to get really specific, that item 1 needs to also say water treatment and wastewater treatment.
And I'm not sure just for the transparency piece, so people understand, it's for the, we're postponing the demolition of the old plant, not in case anybody gets confused that we're going to destroy the new one.
Through you, Mayor.
Yeah.
sorry, just making sure I have the, just want to make sure I have the wording right on that number 1. So if council is okay, I'll just read the last part over. And again, just making sure that we have the true intent. Okay. So the Renfrew Town Council, that Renfrew Town Council bring forward the following changes to the 2025 water and wastewater draft budget. That number 1, that Town Council approve up to $50,000 for water treatment, water distribution, wastewater collection, and wastewater treatment projects, and that any additional expenditures required are brought forward to Council for approval and funding allocation. 2, that the budget for water main breaks be reduced to $100,000. 3, that the demolition of the old wastewater plant be removed from the budget to allow staff time to determine actual costs in advance of the 2026 budget deliberation. And 4, that staff bring forward budgeted costs for water meter replacements over a 4-year term.
I'm good with that. Council good with that?
I would just need a mover and a seconder.
Councilor McDonald, second by Councilor McWhorter. Any further questions, comments? All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you, Council. Moving on to C.2, the 2025 water and wastewater draft budget. The Renfrew Town Council received the 2025 water and wastewater draft budget for discussion with recommendations of any changes to be brought forward to the February 25th, 2025 regular meeting of Council for adoption. Mover, please. Councillor Agree, seconded by Councillor McDonald. And I will turn it over to the Treasurer.
Just from the presentation last week with regards to the rates following the rate study, just wondering if there's any further discussion on the rate study. I have handed the rates to Councillor McWhorter because he was away last week. This does follow the rate study, and we have been following the rate study moving forward. Just to bring it to the public meeting, I'd like to know if we are going to continue to follow the rate study with the actual increases as proposed in the recommendation last week. So in water, the base charge was increasing by 6.99%, wastewater base charge by 1%, with an overall average of 3.92% on the base charges. And the consumption rate difference, the water 2.13, wastewater 0.81%, with a total of 1.52% increase on the consumption draft rates based on the rate study.
Councillor Agree?
Through you, Mayor Sidney, I agree that we need to continue on the path of the rate study and keep it going that way. It's my thought.
Any other? Councillor McWhorter?
To you, Mayor, for Treasurer Jackson. So it's 1.52% on wastewater, and it's 3.92% on wastewater also? Consumption rate, and okay. So what's that mean to an overall household, like an average household in town, that base rate increase? Can you tell me that?
Not off the top of my head, but I will bring a slide forward for the next meeting, for the public meeting, so that people can understand, and I can base it on the average consumption as well as the full year of base charges. This right now is bi-monthly, so it would be an increase of about $3.30 for bi-monthly, so it would be an additional $12 a year for base charges on the water, and wastewater it would be additional maybe $6 on wastewater for the base rate, and then I'd have to look at the actual consumption, average consumption per household for the year. But I can definitely do that, bring that forward.
Councillor McWhorter?
Thank you, Mayor. Just to follow up, I would appreciate that. I think when people look at water rates, When you're looking at this 3.92% and 1.52% or 52%, you're talking of a significant increase if it was property taxes. But being water rates, it's quite a bit different, and I think it would be great to be able to tell the public just how much that actually dollar-wise is. Like when you're talking $12, that's not a great increase, but when you're looking at it as 6% increase, if they're still old school like I am and I look at that as property taxes, it's quite a different scenario. So if we could come out with that would be awesome. I'd really appreciate that. Thank you.
Any other questions from council? Any agreements with following the study? Opposed? No, I'm not doing a vote. No. I mean, you said that you recommend that we go with following this, keep it going. Yeah. What? Yeah.
Okay.
Any other questions on this motion? Nothing changed. So I'm just making sure that we're all good. Now I'm going to ask for the vote. So all in favor? It's carried. Thank you, council. All right, moving on to D, upcoming meetings of council and committees. Regular council meeting, February 25th, 2025 at 5:30 p.m. Public meeting, water and wastewater 2025 draft budget. And we are now adjourned at 10:24. Thank you, council and staff.